Welcome everyone. First of all, Happy New Year. I think I can still say Happy New Year because it's still January. I think you're allowed to say it until February. That's the etiquette. So I'm saying Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you guys made it safely into the new year. I hope you're not too much affected by the craziness that's going on in the world right now. And I am grateful to meet you all for this wonderful little journey into entertainment finance for film and television. I mention always that I offer these classes kind of as a, first of all, I love doing them because I like the sound of my own voice. There's that. But I offer them also to answer questions. I usually run through some essentials of the modules. I give some background that I can think of in the moment I think of it as I'm talking about the subject matter. So it's not a replacement for you to not study the module. So it's not like, oh, I attended Jeanette's class, now I don't have to read 2 weeks of modules. No, you still read the modules. So just FYI. So in the modules, you'll find a lot of fun stuff. So don't deprive yourself of that. But if you feel like you want to hang out with me for like 2 hours on a Saturday morning, you can do that. And then, of course, I'm recording these classes so that everyone who cannot join us, because we have a lot of people that are on different sides of the planet and have different time zones, so that they cannot always make it. And then you can always feel free to watch the recording. Sometimes people also watch the recording again to repeat the information. And I'm sorry for my glasses being like this, but it's pretty dark here still. I'm on Maui, so it's fairly early. When it gets lighter in the room, hopefully I'm not glaring so much. So I'm going to share a screen with you guys where I prepared a little PowerPoint presentation to guide us through this presentation today, through the morning. And I'm going to try to share this. And if you don't see this in a minute, you let me know. Hold on, share screen, share this screen. So do you guys see this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes,
So
we
what
do.
I'm not seeing right now is you. So I'm going to try to move the chat up. Let me see if I can open up a chat. So here's what I suggest. I'm opening up the chat, and you can of course type in questions there, and I will look at the chat once in a while when I'm done with a section of a presentation. Now, if you have questions, just write them down so that you don't forget to ask them. And then when I'm taking little breaks in the presentations, you can feel free to ask me the question. I'll tell you, if anyone questions, and then you can shoot the questions at me. So that way we can make it through the presentation, but we also can make sure that I answer all your questions. All right, let's dig into this thing. What I want to talk about this morning is basically the essentials of 2 modules, module 1 and 2. Module 1, obviously you went through, you already did your quiz, or you're going to do your quiz. And module 2 is what's going to open up for you on Monday morning. So I'm walking through some major points in relation to major studio and independent film financing. We're going to talk a little bit about distribution and sales, and we're going to do a basic finance plan already today in this first session. So you can just get a feel for some of the terminology, some of the things that you're going to expect in a more complex form as you're going through your class. I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping as we start. You guys, most of you did a survey and sent that to me, and that's great because it gives me an idea of who you are, where you're at, and what I can adjust for you. If you haven't sent it into Canvas to be graded, please do so. Even if you emailed it to me, just submit it through Canvas real quick because you get some points for that. We did put together a Facebook group. Not everyone's on Facebook, so don't worry about it if you're not on there. But if you are on there, all the course participants, I would say majority of the course participants I've had over the years are actually on that group. And a lot of them share information about projects that they're doing right now where they might need help, that share information about new industry trends, events. There are some things about financiers that I work with that I put on there. I share a lot of information about things that happen in the industry. So it's a nice little place to network, but also to find out what's going on in entertainment industry today. This course is actually offered in 2 versions, as a hybrid course and as an online course. The hybrid course is a version where you go live, but right now we're not doing that. And then the online course is the version that you all are taking. The idea here is to make sure that you watch all the videos and read all the modules. If you, for example, if you see the word image somewhere and you don't see an image, please let me know, because that means that the image is not uploaded on your Canvas, and I will upload it. If any of the videos are not working, also let me know. And if any of the files are not opening, please let me know. There's always technical issues with Canvas, but I don't always see what you see because I have a different platform on my end. So if there's anything missing, please alert me. Get the textbook if you don't have it yet, because we're going to work it alongside the course. It's also good for you to have and keep later when you put your project together. It's a good thing to just, you know, have and look up, okay, what did we do? How did we do this? What are these case studies? How do I put this Excel sheet together? How does the finance plan work? What are the essential terms? Who do I negotiate with? What do I tell them what I want? All this stuff is all in this book. The reason why I did this book was actually students who said, we get this information in the course, but we want a condensed version that we can take with us. And because the course materials is very hard to copy them down and there isn't really a PDF for them, I mean, I do a summary page at the end just so you have something, but the details of the course are nowhere unless you have them on the course and unless you download them. And it's a little bit of work because there's a lot of material. So the book is a good handy thing to keep. Quizzes and assignments, they show up on your calendar every week and you'll see when they're due, just send them in. Now here's the thing with deadlines. I'm not really a deadline freak. So if you need more time with stuff and you can't send it in on the deadline that it's supposed to come in, don't worry about that. Don't stress yourself out with, oh my God, I have to do the quiz by Monday and I have these other things I need to do. So don't stress out. I really want you to be able to run through the course the way you want to, in your own pace, at your own time, at your own schedule. And that includes your assignments and your quizzes and the midterm and the final. Well, the final should reach me sometime before the course ends or when the course ends. But everything else, if I have it by the time the course ends, it's fine. So if you want to keep on track, obviously it's good for you to do the quizzes because it keeps you on track also with the material. But if you find it harder to do it because of things that go on in your life, please don't stress out and just send it to me whenever you have it. I mean, submit it through Canvas, that is. Again, we talked about technical issues. I do offer office hours every time we have a class. Like today, after the class, I have 3 hours that I'm available for anyone who wants to get on the phone with me or do a Zoom session with me and has questions. You can sign up for a slot on Canvas. If for whatever reason you don't see the time that you like or the day doesn't work for you because you're far away, like our friend in Australia, just send me an email with a different day that works and a time that works, or give me some options to choose from, and then we'll just pick another day other than the Saturday. So you're not stuck to talk to me just on office hours. I just want you to know it's easier to just do it then and there because then I have it out of my head, but I have no problem meeting with you at a mutually convenient time that works better. Questions, you can always email me on Canvas, and as you hear from my accent, I am German. Some of my material has some Jinglish, as I call it, in it. So if you see something, whether it's a spelling mistake or something, please alert me, because I'm not perfect. English is my second language, and because I wrote all the materials myself and I update it constantly, there might be some spellings in there for which I apologize, but if you tell me where they are, I can fix them. That's it. Do we have any questions on this? No questions. All right, cool. So,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Heidi. Hi. You were talking about this survey. I completed it. I didn't see a way to submit it through Canvas. I am familiar with Canvas, but I couldn't submit the survey that way, so I emailed it to you through Canvas. Is that what you were wanting?
If you have no way to submit it to Canvas, I have to check what's going on your platform, because it should be able, you should be able to do. Huh?
It's hidden. You need to go to grades. And if you go to the courses in your grades, it'll show you don't get any grade in it yet. And then you could click on it and submit your assignment.
Yeah, try that, Heidi. But also, I need to check your course. Right now we have 3 courses parallel, and people here on this Zoom are from 3 courses, right? So I'm going to check your course and make sure that the setting is properly. If you don't mind, Heidi, send me a quick note on Canvas so I know what course you're in, and I will then get back to you on that. But if you send it to me through Canvas, I will mark the grade and it's fine. But I want you to be able to submit everything else, and I want to make sure the submitting platform is actually working for you. So send me a quick note so that way I can check. These birds are loud out there. So you get some Hawaiian birds on the recording. I don't know if you can hear them.
Jeanette, I have a question on the book.
Yeah.
I ordered it when you sent around that initial email, and I still have not received it. And I got a notice that there are weather delays or, with respect to delivery.
Okay, where did you order it with the publisher?
Yeah, Lulu.
Lulu. Okay, usually it takes about 2 weeks from them. That's why, when did you order this? So that was like about 2 weeks ago. It's a 9.
Yeah,
Give it a little time. You're not going to need it before week 3 and after. So you're fine. If you don't have it after 2 weeks, let me know again. I'll call them. I'll find out what's going on there.
Okay, great. So it's not going to be on the quiz or this week's quiz or anything.
There's nothing in there.
Okay.
You're not going to deal with it for 3 weeks, because I know sometimes these things are delayed. Usually I send it out from my office, but because I'm not in my office, I don't have a way to send it. When I send it, it goes very fast. It's there in 2 days if you're in LA. But when it's sent from the publisher, it takes longer, unfortunately, because they actually print every book as it's ordered. That's why it takes so long. I don't know why. But yeah, and the worst is even Amazon. Some people almost order it on Amazon. That's an absolute nightmare. So don't order it there right now, because they have still kinks that they're figuring out.
Okay, thank you.
Lulu is your best. Lulu is your best bet. Even the UCLA store takes forever. So it's that. But you know, if you don't get it, we'll talk about it in a week or so. We'll figure something out.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I noticed a missing image. Should I just email you about it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay.
Great.
I have another question, Heidi, about the textbook. Sorry. I had noticed that you are selling it through a website that you have. Can we order it directly through that website? Because I'm in Los Angeles. Would that be the most efficient?
That's why I know. Right now, I'm not in LA. That's why I wrote you a note saying, do it with the publisher right now. Because when I'm not in my office, the book is, when I'm not there, my assistants, we're all here right now. So there isn't anyone that, I mean, yes, I mean, I might have a few if worse comes worse, but it's easier for everyone to do it through the publisher right now. When there changes, if there's a change, I will let you know. But for now, I think just do publisher. They send it to you. It just takes a little longer, but that's all there is.
And do you think the publisher will be more expedient than the UCLA bookstore if you're ordering it online?
You know, why don't you call Gilbert from the UCLA bookstore? There is a number for him in the email that I sent you, or in the
yeah.
Where was it? I know I put it somewhere. Somewhere in the course. I think in one of the opening pages where I say, do this, do that, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it. There is a number for the guy that runs the bookstore, and his name is Gilbert Morales. Call him up, ask him if he has one, if he can send it to you, because if they still have them, then it's fine. I never know how many they have. So if they have them on hand, they can just send them to you, and then it will be faster. I would check with them. Yeah?
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? All right. So first we're gonna, go into some questions here, because what I want you to understand is that even people that work in this industry 30 years like me, we don't know anything about anything, because things change all the time. The industry is changing all the time. And we're always reinventing ourselves, trying to figure out what do we do next. So does anyone really know if any movie is going to be successful at the box office? Certainly not right now, because there isn't much box office. And in general, the idea is you don't know what your movie is doing until it's actually out and it's being released. Even, with all the data that has been compiled, all there is for box office revenues can only be guesses. And they're usually, not really there. I mean, they're off and off, because the viewer behavior has changed so much as it relates to going to the movie theaters. Who is actually going? Where are they going? What country are they in? Is the movie even shown in theater? How long is it shown in theater? So there are so many elements that we cannot predict, that no one can really know what any movie is going to make in the box office. But there is something you can do, which is making sure you structure deals in a way that whatever money is being made is not eaten up by all the expenses that are related to the release. That's something to remember, and how you do that and what to watch for is something we'll talk about in this course in more detail. I'm actually going to go through an example in a minute. So just remember, for this question, cap your expenses any which way you can. Now, when you work with investors, as I do, I have an investor group that I work with. My company itself invests. We always think about when we invest, what is going to be our return of investment? And we have to calculate that early on in order to make a decision whether or not we want to invest in a film or television project. Do we know what that ROI is going to be? Even for me, it's a hit and miss because I don't know. And I've done 40 some projects. But what I do know is there are ways for me and for my investors when I work with them as a producer to reduce my investor risk and their investor risks. And these risk mitigation strategies are extremely important to optimize profit potential. And what those risk mitigation elements are that you can apply as a producer and an investor or anyone working on a project is something we'll talk about in this course. Now, when it comes to your profits as a producer, obviously you don't know. All you know is I'm thinking of putting this much producer fee in the budget. And even if you do that, you don't know if you're going to actually get this at the end of the day because there's so many things that will change. Once you start working with the bond company, they will try to attach some of your fee for their security. And as it comes to your profits, it really depends on how many profit participants are you sharing with? Are you sharing with actors? Are you sharing with your investor? Are you deferring some and sharing with people that deferred some of their fees? There are so many profit participants later in the pot that you really don't know. But what you do know is you need to structure these profit participants in a way that optimizes your profits. Arnold, I know it's on Amazon. All right, we'll get it to you. We'll figure that out. We'll get there. Arnold just sent me a message. Anyway, so keep in mind that when it comes to producers' profits, you want to keep the ownership share with you. The only entity you want to share your ownership with is the investor who will be part of your IP. And what that means, we'll talk about. But there isn't a way for you to know in the beginning how much money you'll actually be making until you get deeper into the weeds and until you know how to structure it so you can optimize your profits as well. Now, who knows what the market will be? We don't know that either, especially in times right now. The market shifts and changes constantly. We don't know anyone who's going to the movie theater, at least not in the US, what the box office is going to be, what it's going to cost to release the movie. There are so many shifts and changes. We don't know any of the market applicable changes that we will deal with. But what we do know is we can do research together with our sales agent. And the sales agent is the person that will take our movie or television project and sell it for us around the globe, and sometimes even also in the US. And the conversation with the sales agent will tell us a little bit about what our chances are for revenues from the various countries that we're selling our project into. So a conversation with the sales agent, a review of the ultimates, also called sales estimates, will be helpful to determine what the value of a project is and can be. Now, what are the steps that you have to take in order to get a feasible film or television project made? That's kind of the focus of this course. So it's not just about how do I get anything made and get it on the air, small or big or streamer or TV. It's also about how do I do it so I can make money off it? Because it's not just I'm making a movie. I mean, we all know there are hundreds of movies out there that never see any screen and they just sit on someone's desk and collect dust. The idea here is to make something that can be distributed and can be distributed in a way that actually creates profits for you as a producer and for the investor. I should share also that I produce and invest, which is not normally the case. Normally you have a situation where there is a producer who goes to an investor, and then there is an investor who invests with the producer. So my way of producing and financing might differ from what you will experience when you work with another producer, because their hat is a different, they might wear a different hat. For me, it's important to protect my investors because my investors will call me up and say, where's my money? Well, I will be chasing the producer that I work with and saying, where's my money? When I co-produce something with someone. So my view is very much about mitigating risk and optimizing profits. That's not necessarily every producer's view, potentially. So when I share my way of doing things with you. It's really my view, and it's something that I have found to work for me. This is how I made money, is basically what I'm saying. But that doesn't mean it's the only way, and it doesn't mean it's a way that other people choose. So I just want you to be reminded of, there are different ways from here to Rome. But what you learn in this class is how I have put these projects together, how I'm still putting them together, and how I actually make sure that I protect my investors, that I protect myself as a producer, that I protect my producing partners, and that I focus on content that I know I can sell to buyers meaning studios, network stations, streamers. So my content tends to be also commercially driven. So I'm not the ideal person to ask about what am I going to do with my $100,000 art house movie about how to knit socks? So not ideal question for me to answer, because I don't know the answer to that. What I would tell you is, hopefully it's a nice sock movie that finds its way through the festival circle. There is a way to make money, obviously, with art house movies in the festival circle. It's a very high risk proposition though. And it's not one that I would ever do, and I can't do because I have to protect my investors. So I go with these structures that I apply a little methodically about figuring out in advance, is there a market for my movie or my TV show? Does anyone want this? Even if I think it's a great idea to make a movie about socks, does the world out there think the same way? Even I have to check my own excitement about a project with the reality in the marketplace. And that to me is important for every project. All right, enough talk about this. Let's get into it. I want to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are today. Sometimes in the 1900s, it's on your module, I already forgot, there were a bunch of studios that were founded. And their job was basically like any manufacturing plant. We are producing these movies on our studio lot. We own the rights. We own the writer. We own the director. We own the cast. We contract all of these people, and the manufactured good, the movie, is owned by us. And then what we do with that manufactured good, we as a studio, we then distribute it around the world. In the US, we own all the theaters, and internationally, we own also most of the theaters, or we talk to someone who owns theaters internationally. What I'm telling you is that the studios at the time, the big five in the golden age, controlled the entire value chain from the inception of an idea through the ownership of the IP, through the production process and financing the production, and through the distribution and revenue chain, because they own theaters. So everything was basically controlled as a monopoly by the studios at that time. Then around 1948, I think, there was a change that was made legally that forbid the studios to own theaters. So they had to sell their theaters. They could no longer own theaters. This is when the theaters were sold to exhibitors, to theater owners. So even today, most of the theaters, if not all of them, are not owned by studios. I think it's going to change. That's just my personal point of view, but we can talk about that in a minute. But for now, what you have to think about is what the studio does. They produce, develop, and distribute with an exhibitor. So they do a deal with the exhibitor in the US, they do a deal with the exhibitor in France, they do a deal with the exhibitor in Germany. They do deals with all these theater exhibitors to distribute their movies. Then when the landscape changed again and television was invented, the studio had to change their business model again. Now they had to start producing television shows, which they did. However, everything still happened on the studio lot with talent that they had contracted. So imagine you're a writer, you're owned and hired by the studio, you have a contract with them. Same for the director, you're exclusive to the studio, you have an exclusive contract with Warner Brothers, you can't work with Paramount. You are Frank Sinatra, you have a deal with Paramount, you can't work with Warner Brothers. That's how it was structured at that time. And then later, these things started to change. The studio couldn't or wouldn't contract stars anymore, and the stars became represented independently by agents and lawyers and managers. And then started working for other studios as well. So landscape changed a little bit. What also happened around the 80s, 90s, beginning of 2000 is that the studios changed the production volume that they were putting out. Instead of putting out, I don't know, 70 films a year per studio, they lowered it down to like 30, basically half. And what they did is they focused on tentpole movies only. Tentpole meaning movies that are based on IPs that have a built-in audience, like the DC, the Marvels, the Harry Potters. Those kind of movies, $150 million and upwards, is what the studios focused on. That opened up a whole array of product that was able to be produced independently by independent producers. So this is where the independent producing world really boomed, because it was us, the independent producer, who filled the gap of now doing the romantic comedies that they were doing very little of, all the action thrillers that they were doing very little of, and all the commercially, I call it theatrical level feature films that are released in the theaters and licensed by a studio, not produced, but licensed by a studio, and then would be theatrical release. So you would see films with New Line Cinema or Focus Features or Lionsgate, or even with the studio, Sony or any of its outlet, even Warner Bros. And Paramount, that you would see the logo as it's their movie in the theaters, but they didn't actually produce or finance it. They just licensed it. So for an independent producer, that means we get to make all the theatrical movies and we get to sell them to the studio for distribution. And that really worked for the longest time, I would say, until about 2008, when the whole financial crisis happened. Because at that time, money dried up also for us producers, and we had to reinvent ourselves. The whole world changed, and the buying power for the studios, network stations, not just in the US, but internationally, reduced. So what we're faced with now, when you look at today, is you are dealing with a lot more content providers. You're dealing with people that need content like never before. We have all these streaming services, Peacock, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, you name it. Everyone's out there wanting original content. And then you have the studios putting their stuff online. There is so much demand. It's the highest demand ever in the world. What happens, however, is that the pricing level has not increased. Usually in the regular world of making movies or making any kind of content, if the demand is high and the product is low, you can get more money for what you're producing. This is not the case right now. So what we're dealing with right now is having to create content for feasible budget and making sure that it is content that someone wants. This is kind of the conundrum we're facing, which I actually wanted to get into later. For now, I'd like to talk to you about an example that I put in your module, where it shows you how important it is to have, if you, let's say, pitch a movie to a studio and they say, we'll do it. This is an option. You can pitch a movie to Warner Brothers, it's an idea, and they say, we'll do it all, we'll develop it, we'll finance it, we'll produce it, we'll distribute it because we love it so much. In this case, you're looking at something that could be, a bigger budget. And when you look at what they did with Harry Potter, whose production cost was about, I want to say $370,000, it made about $600 million in the box office, but it's still running a loss. And the reason why that is when you look at $612 million in box office revenues, and you look at what the expenses are, these are all studio expenses. Accounts receivable is basically the costs associated with the distribution of the distribution phase of the movie. This money goes to the studio. It's just $2 million. It's the first chunk they deduct. The distribution fee is charged by the studio, so $11 million goes to the studio. The expenses that are related to P&A, printing, marketing, all these kind of things that are related to the release of the movie are 191. This money also goes to the studio because the studio is the entity that releases the film. And then, of course, the negative cost, the actual production cost, and the related interest, because the studio is charging an interest for the money that they're putting into the movie, also goes to the studio. So what I'm trying to tell you is these are all little profit centers that are owned by the studio. So the studio is making money with charging expenses. So it's not it that looks like it's losing money. It's the investor who invested into the studio that's looking at this number. The studio is actually making money because all this money, all these expenses are going to departments that are owned and operated by the studio. The studio's job is to manufacture and distribute. That's its job. That's what it does. It has to make money with that work. And that's why all its departments are here, and all the deductions it applies is to pay its own departments. So if you ever do a deal with them, or let's say you're an investor, there are people that actually invest with studios, your job would be to cap these expenses and say to the studio, yes, you can deduct a distribution fee of 25%, but you're going to cap it at $200,000, $200 million, let's say. You put a number down. You put a number in the negotiation where you tell the studio you cannot charge more than $200,000 for a distribution fee. When you do the release, studio, I'm going to allow you to do a release campaign, but I don't want to spend more than $100 million on the release campaign. So let's cap it there. So the conversation here is to cap expenses. And if you can have that conversation because you're going to a studio with someone who maybe co-finances your movie, that's a good conversation to be had. Now, if you pitch a movie to the studio and they buy your idea, it's probably a difficult conversation to be had because they're taking all the risk and they want to make the optimal amounts in money for all their departments. But it's good for you to understand what you look at in both scenarios. Any questions on this?
Yeah. Hi, Janet.
Hi.
I have two questions about the, for example, Netflix has had an idea of creating theaters too,
Yeah.
but I don't know if that's legal for them because I don't know if they are an actual studio because they are not considered a classic studio or a separate company, you know?
Correct. And you're bringing up a point, if I may interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
I forgot earlier. I believe that because Amazon, I think already, if I'm not mistaken, already bought a studio or they're co-partnered on someone with a theatrical studio. Netflix is working on that as well. And when the streaming services are allowed to do this, there isn't really, I believe, a legal reason why the studios are not allowed to do this, because the studios now become streaming services. And who's to say that their streaming service cannot buy also a theater? I believe the development will be that the studios will try to buy theaters again. And I believe the conversation is also sparked by the fact, was it AMC who blocked a release of a movie? There was some, I don't remember the actual theater, but I remember there was a fight with a theater chain and a studio about the release of a certain movie, and the studio was really not happy with what's going on there. And if the theater owners can put that kind of pressure on studios on how to release their movies, that's going to be a problem. Warner Brothers decided, I'm going to only put my movies in for 30 days, the end. I'm not going to spend all that money. I'm going to put it in for 30 days and then I'm going to put it on HBO Max. The theater exhibitors might have an issue with that because the longer the movie runs and the more successful it is, the more popcorn they sell. So I foresee issues in relationships with exhibitors and studios for the very reason that the studio now says, we have to push our streaming service. That's where the money is for us. We want to not lose people online, and we're not giving our content to Netflix and Amazon anymore. We want to hold them within our houses. And in order to do that, we need to make the content interesting enough. And if we run the movie forever and ever in the theaters, it's not interesting for people to come to our platform. We want them to come because they want to see Wonder Woman 4 weeks later after it released in the theaters. So to your point, I believe there will be a shift and change. It's my personal opinion, I might be wrong, in this theater world, also because this entire world is upside down and there needs to be something that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I cut you off, so go ahead with your question.
Oh yeah, no, and the second question actually is a follow-up of that, because I know that because of COVID and because of COVID, there's now more theater debts, and maybe I mean I don't know how the market will react to that, but probably it will be a shift of streaming services are gonna be maybe much pricier, and theaters are gonna lower their prices on the tickets.
Well, that is, hit and miss, who knows? But I do know that in order for Netflix and Amazon to be to be considered for the Academy Awards, they do have to do theatrical releases. So
yeah.
they have to change their way of thinking. And I think that is part of the initiation for them to think about maybe getting into the theater world themselves. And given that, you know, this is a shaky world, I think they want to control that destiny themselves. And that's why they're trying to get into the theater business. So that's, you know, something, I mean, again, who knows?
Yeah,
now, the
Thank you.
studio financing model, I summed it up in this kind of graph here, where you see that the box office revenues are in the first bubble here. They're called defined gross. And you see that the major studio and exhibitor are actually sharing in the box office revenues. They are agreeing to a percentage when they talk to each other. They say, for this movie or that movie, it's like 35% to the exhibitor, 65% to the studio. For other movies, it might be 50-50. They are talking about exhibitor participations in the box office. And this exhibitor ticket participation is deducted in the first round up here. So the movie studio then starts charging all its fees against its portion. So let's say the movie has a $600 million or $500 million box office, whatever it might be, and the exhibitor gets 50% of that. $250 million go to the exhibitor, and then the studio gets to charge all its fees, all the applicable deductions against its share. So that's something to remember as well. Not the entire box office at this moment, it might change, goes to the studio, because the exhibitor early on takes a participation off the top, and then all the deductions, as we talked about, distribution fee, P&A fee and P&A cost, distribution expenses, potential residuals from the guilds that we might have to deal with, production costs, and any interest and profit participations are being deducted until you get to a profit. We call it net profit in our world, and in their world it's something else. Defined proceeds is what they call it. And after these deductions are applied, that's when you get there. But remember that the exhibitor here is taking a big chunk from the box office that the studio will get, which, by the way, is the same for the independent. If you as an independent produce a movie and you exhibit it with a theater, and let's say you do it yourself, you say, I'm going to do my own movie and I'm going to do a deal with AMC to release it. Whatever deal you do with them, they also will participate in the box office with you. So no matter how that works, whenever you work with an exhibitor who owns a theater, you're going to have to share the box office with them. Now, we talked about earlier how the studio, when you pitch an idea to them, and that really goes for studio, network stations, streaming services, anyone you work with, when you pitch an idea to them and they finance the development and production, in many cases, they own this idea outright. They own the IP. You get a producer fee, and you might get some other things depending on how good you're negotiating the deal with whoever buys your content. Again, it could be studio, network station, or a streamer. Now, there is a way for you to share in the IP and do it in a way that you still work with a studio or a network station or a streamer in tandem together and optimize the distribution of your project. These examples that I gave you, I'm sure you all know about Star Wars and George Lucas. It's not a secret that he was able to keep certain rights from 20th Century Fox, which then enabled him to build his empire. And it was only started by the fact that 20th Century Fox didn't want to pay for the whole movie, and he was in a bind. So he had to figure out, what do I do now? So he kept, I think, in the beginning, merchandising rights, and then expanded from there. When we look at and built his empire, because the merchandising rights would have otherwise been owned by 20th Century Fox, because the IP includes all related rights, not just the rights to the script, not just the right to the idea, not just the right that you might have purchased as underlying rights. Merchandising, sequel, remake, characters, spin-offs, all those rights would be owned by whoever is paying for the production and the development for the idea that you might have pitched them. Now, in an example, for example, with Baywatch, a friend of mine, Michelle and Michael Berg, developed this show Baywatch. And in the beginning, they did it, I want to say with ABC or NBC, I forgot the network. So they did the first season, everyone was happy, the network owned the idea, all was good. So they did a regular first season. And then the network decided, we want to take it off the air. So the producers were like, what? After one season, it's really working. And the funny thing was that the international markets, especially Germany, reacted very positive to David Hasselhoff. They all loved him. So the international was like, we want this. And the US network's like, it's not really working for us. So the producer then negotiated a deal with the network and saying, okay, fine. If you don't want to do it, can we get our rights back? And so they did the deal with the network. And the network said, okay, fine, here's your rights. So the producers got their rights back. What they then did is they spoke to, I believe it was a German network first, and told them, listen, we want to do another season. We want to continue the series, but we need to do some deals internationally to pay for the production. So they did a really big deal with Germany, who loves to this day David Hasselhoff. He's a hero over there. And they did, I think, a deal with some other countries and were able to put the funding together for the second season. And then what they did is they licensed it back to the original network and said, you want it? And I think it even changed networks at the time. But my point here is not where did it go in the US. My point is the producers took the rights back, found a different way to put the money together for the series and continued the series. And we all know this is a huge brand. So A, the network was a little wrong in deciding this thing doesn't work. And B, the producer took charge in saying, I believe in this, I'm gonna make this happen a different way, and is still owning the IP today. When they did the movie with The Rock, Michael and Michelle were still involved, and they still got money, and it's great. So they have a residual value for a brand that is huge, that they participate on their entire lives. So it's not just the series is making money while it's on the air. If the series becomes a brand, you make money continuously just by owning a portion of the rights or all the rights. So an IP conversation and thinking about how you structure your IP optimally is really worth running through some scenarios. Dog Whisperer was created and produced actually by my husband, and that's why I know the story fairly well. When they did the first season with National Geographic told them, we don't want to pay for the whole thing. We're paying for 75% of it. You have to figure out the rest. So the producer said, him and his partners said, okay, fine. If we have to finance the balance, we want to keep the international rights and the ancillary rights and the online rights. And then at the time, this is like 20 years ago or whatnot, there was no internet. So they're like, in National Geographic, yeah, you can keep all this. We're just going to keep US domestic. So all National Geographic had for 10 seasons was the US right. Meanwhile, this brand, the Dog Whisperer, exploded internationally and around the world and became a $90 million brand. And again, the producers were able to monetize on, I think it was $40 million out of international plus ancillary and merchandising. And they wrote 7 books, all of which were bestsellers with New York bestseller lists. They made all this money on the ancillary stuff and the shows that Cesar Millan did, all the live stuff. All the stuff would have been owned by National Geographic. Would they have paid the extra 25% and paid for the whole production, which they didn't want to do. So now the Dog Whisperer team got to keep all these extra rights, including the online rights, which are huge right now. So there is a conversation. Of course, in the beginning it was a headache for them. We have to now find 25% of this budget. How do we do this? And they were normal network producers and had no idea how to do this. And they had to just reinvent themselves in trying to get this thing made. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because they could keep all the rights. So the idea for you here in the lesson would be, try to keep the ownership, try to keep creative control as much as you can within reason. Story development is sometimes a little headachy and can be expensive, but it is worth it. Your job during the development is to try to finance as much as you can yourself or with the partner, but make the project as good as it can be, because it is important for you to be competitive. So half-assing the development phase by thinking, script's good enough to show to some people, not a good idea. Really work on something and get feedback from people to make sure this is a project that can actually be sold. This is something that people want. This is different. This is unique, and it's timely, and it has value. It has a unique value to it. So that's why it's worth working on the development. When it comes to the budget, we always go through the process of putting the budget down based on the script, and then we get a reality check and figuring out, well, okay, we need the money for the script, but that is not actually what we can spend on it because no one's going to pay this. Thinking about making your budget what it should be is an important path for you to make something real, to get it made. Because if your budget is too high and the license fees are too low, there is no way for you to create a financial structure that makes any sense. Distribution, obviously something to think about per the earlier thing, but also early on, do you really want to take this movie into the theaters? Is it worth spending a huge release campaign for having it in the theater for a week and then, you know, who knows if it makes money or not? There are different ways to make money with these movies today by going and making an online premiere. And there's a lot of networks and streamers out there that pay a higher license if it can be a premiere on their platform. For the financing, we need to make sure that we control all the aspects and provide transparency. And how we do that, we'll go through it now. We talked about the changing landscapes for the studios, you know, creating more tentpole pictures. We're talking about the higher demand that is applicable right now due to the very many platforms that are out there. The US distribution is something I want to quickly talk about simply because it is essential and it's not. For a theatrical movie, I think it is a good idea, or for a movie that's supposed to become a theatrical movie, it's a good idea to think about what could my US strategy be. But I have done a majority of films that were theatrical movies that I have not done a deal with the studio in advance. So I basically financed them and then sold them to the studio later, because the US market was at the time and still is a very volatile market for any feature film. It is very hard to sell the movie in advance to a platform, even in advance of making it. It's easier to sell the movie when it's done, but there is a way to get the movie made through working with the international market and creating some demand there. And that is something we'll talk about when we talk about pre-sales. The thing to remember here is, because of the license fee reduction, the markets pay less money to you as a license. And because of shrinking costs that you have to apply, you have to be very clever on how to do your budget. It is a balance that you have to keep in thinking about what should my budget be versus what I need, and how can I get it to what it should be, where can I save? And it's a conversation about how much money is it worth and how much money can I spend. The idea for you is to develop something that's unique, that has a feasible budget, and where you can get some feedback from a sales agent relating its value. So when you talk to a sales agent and he'd give you a sales estimate sheet that kind of looks like, hold on, this. The sales estimates will tell you, based on your budget range, what the value of your movie is in every country. Now this is a little small. By the way, I'm going to email this to all of you so you have this a little more clearer on your computer. What Hollywood Reporter did, this is a while ago, they created what's called the going rate, which basically says if your budget is in the range from 1 million to 5 million, the going rate for what people pay in these countries is this range. If your movie is between 5 million and 10 million, the going rate of what a country pay for a license fee is this. So they created what is called a range. This range is very much subject to the movie, and it's very much subject to your conversation with the sales agent. This thing gives you a basic understanding of a range, what it could be, but it's not something where you can say it's written in stone. It really depends on what movie do you do. Meaning, what is your genre? Is it a comedy? It's harder to sell internationally unless you have an A-level star. Is it an action thriller? Easier to sell because this is a genre that most every country in the world wants to buy. Is it a sci-fi? Also a good genre to sell, but not easy to produce depending on your budget level. Is it a drama, period drama even? Harder to sell unless you have an A-level actor in the lead. So these genres and the decision you make with the genre that you're developing and the cast you're putting together and the director you're putting on will dictate a value, and that value will reflect something like this. It will reflect a sales estimate sheet that will tell you, here's the movie, this is the genre, here's your cast that you're thinking of attaching, here's the director that you have attached. And if those elements are like this, this is what you can get for every country. And the sales agent will put a sales estimate sheet together, also referred to as optimal, ultimates or projections. I always say sales estimates, but there are different words for this. And that sales estimate sheet will show every country that he will sell to, and it will give you two columns. One is the take column, and the other one is the ask column. The take column is the lowest price that the sales agent will accept for a license fee for this movie, and it's the column that the bank will go by when they run their projections, the investor will go by when they run the risk profile, and you should go by when you do your finance plan. The ask is the price that the sales agent will ask for and say to the German buyer, hi Germany, I want $1 million for the German rights. And then Germany says, I only want to pay 800,000. The take shows 500, so you end up somewhere in the middle. The reality is you will likely end up somewhere in the middle. The movie will be sold somewhere between take and ask. If the sales agent does not achieve the take number, which is the lowest number because everyone says no, they will have to ask you as a producer, can I sell the movie for less than take? Can I sell it for 400,000 even though the take for Germany was 500,000, but Germany only wants to pay 400,000. Will you allow me to sell it? That's a conversation at that time. But for you to know right now is you get a sales estimate sheet from the sales agent that shows you what the value of your movie would be in the worldwide revenue assumptions if you attach certain casts and if you have a movie that has a certain genre and if the movie is in a certain budget range. That's the job of the sales agent. The importance of international sales estimates are such that they will be the base for your financial structure. So if you put sales estimates together for the international marketplace and you're doing a movie, let's say for $1 million, or let's say $5 million, and your sales estimates from international come back and the entire international market looks like it's only going to recoup 2.5 million. So let's say 50%. That basically means that you will make 50% back. So you're making a movie for 5 million, you're getting 2.5 million back. The US is left at zero because the sales agent will not be able to tell us at this moment what the US is worth. No bank will look at the US number, even if someone tells you what the US is worth, as a collateral, because everyone knows the US is a volatile market. So unless you have someone in the US paying you 50% for your movie, you're already running a deficit. You already know at this very moment, you shouldn't be making this movie because it has no value. So the choice you have is you're reducing the budget to get closer to this $2.5 million, or you're changing your cast attachments. You're having a conversation with the sales agent. What can I do to increase the value of my movie? Or you have a conversation with your line producer. What can we do in order to reduce the budget? But the sales estimates are essential for you to have any conversation in relation to any reality of your project. This is the main thing for you to work with and start to get early on when you talk to sales agents that do similar movies like yours to figure out what your movie is actually worth. Now, pre-sales is something else. A pre-sale is basically a sale to a country. Like you would sell the movie, you would sell the German rights to the German distributor, and you do that sale usually after the movie is made. In this case, a pre-sale means you've done the sale while you put the movie together. So pre-sale is a sale that's made before the movie is made, hence pre-sale. Now, when you go out there and you have your movie and you have your cast, let's say you have a $5 million movie and you have Nicole Kidman in it. It's a high-level art house film. Nicole Kidman agreed to do it, $5 million, and the sales estimates are, I don't know, $4 million, right? You're still under what you want because your budget is 5 million, but you can think about, well, the domestic is probably going to give me something because it's Nicole Kidman, and I can shoot the movie in a tax incentivized region where maybe I can make up the $1 million. So you start thinking about how can you how can you meet the deficit? But a $1 million deficit is something you can think about, and you can have a conversation with an investor how to cover that and how you think this could work. And that's a conversation you can have. So you don't have to necessarily have your sales estimates show $5 million because your movie is $5 million. If your sales estimates show between 70 to 75% of your budget, you're in a range of possibility of making money with this thing. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's a range you want. Now, let's say you have that range. And let's say now the sales agent goes out and is pre-selling your movie. Now, in the time when I worked and started in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, until again, like 2005, 2010, I was able to literally pre-sell my entire budget and sometimes pre-sell 120% of my budget. So that means that a lot of distributors around the world would pre-buy the movie before I actually made it. And I even made money before I started making the movie. Those times are gone, no longer exist. Very rarely, maybe someone does. Maybe Netflix will give you 120% of your movie and then they own it. That's an okay deal to make. But short of that, you have to figure out what can my pre-sales be. So today, I would say an okay version of pre-sales that you can feel good about is if a third of your budget is sold. So if you just hit about the 30% mark, that gives you enough indication to say, okay, Germany likes it, Italy likes it, France like it, I made 3 pre-sales and I got 30% of my budget covered from pre-sales. That's an okay signal for you to know there's enough people out there who like my movie. I get 30% pre-sales, I'm in a good place. The bank will also say, great, you have 3 pre-sales. We will now give you a bank loan. We like this. An investor will say, you check the marketplace, 30% pre-sales, that's okay. We like this. The pre-sales will indicate market responses, which will open doors for you to banks and investors. So it's an important thing for you to do, and it's an important thing for you to know. Now, here's the thing. If you have 0 pre-sales or just, you know, a small country, Taiwan likes it, not that I don't Taiwan, but Taiwan is maybe 1% of your budget. If you get 0 feedback from the market, you have to think about making it, because what that tells you is you have a project that no one wants, in essence. So you have 2 options. You change the elements, you figure out why no one wants it. Is it the script? Is it the cast? What is it? Again, a conversation with your sales agent to be had. And you start figuring out how can I optimize my project in order for more people to want it. And people wanting it meaning pre-sales being made. You can take those pre-sales, you will take them to the bank, you get to use a loan against those pre-sale contracts for your financing. That's very important for you because you just raised 30% of your budget that you can use to cover your production cost. That's the good thing about pre-sales. Another good thing about pre-sales is because you have pre-sales that the bank will cash flow for you, they will also give you money for the rights you haven't sold yet. Wow. So now you go to the bank and say, I have 75% in my sales estimates that I think I can make. Of the 75%, I actually pre-sold, let's say 35%. So now you give me a loan for that, bank. And I have 40% left. What do you give me for the 40% that I can still sell, my unsold rights? You give me a loan for this? The bank says, yes. I will give you a loan for up to 50% of what you haven't sold. So the 40% that you haven't sold translates to a 20% bank loan. So now you raised 55% of your budget just by doing pre-sales. So this is a very important thing for you to remember. Now the banks today will give you up to 20% of your budget no matter how many unsold rights you still have to sell. It will never be more than 20% of your budget. Some banks have a cap at 15% of the budget. Depends on who you work with. If you work with like Comerica, they usually go up to 20%. If you work with like Mercantile, they like to cap out at 10% of the budget. So certain banks will have certain comfort levels. The comfort level of a bank is also dictated by who the sales agent is. For you, important to know before you hire the sales agent and do a deal with them, talk to the bank and say, I'm thinking of hiring this sales agent. Is this a bankable sales agent? Will you bank their contracts? Will you bank their numbers? Will you bank their unsold rights? So you need to do a deal with a bankable sales agent in order to make those sales work for you in order to get a loan from a bank. And the nice thing in having a loan from a bank, you're over half already financed. Interest rates are fairly low right now, so you can take advantage of that. And it's a less expensive finance option for you than any other option like equity. Equity is expensive, and we'll get to that in a minute. So think about pre-sales as the driving mechanism for your funding in general. That's why they are important. I always hear producers tell me, oh, you know, if I do pre-sales, people pay less. It's not true. Here's what happens. Every territory has a handful of buyers, and they all talk to each other. So the 5 German buyers say, you saw that movie that, you know, Barbara is doing, for example. She wants $500,000 from Germany. I'm not paying it. Are you paying it? No, I'm not paying it. I'm not. What are you paying? I'm maybe paying 300. Okay, so they talk to each other, and then they say, well, we might just pre-buy it for this amount. What could also happen is, oh, you saw that movie that Barbara is doing? Well, it's a good movie, right? And now they start bidding. The reality is, if you don't pre-sale, these 5 buyers know you haven't pre-sold, and they know you have to sell Germany because it's a big market. So now they will actually give you the lowest possible money that they can get away with. And you have no choice because you have to sell the movie. So selling it after it's finished could actually not be ideal unless it's an amazing movie. So sometimes it's better to pre-sale to keep the price level up, to keep the excitement about the project, what drives the price level going, rather than finishing the movie. Then they've seen it and they're like, we all talk to each other, we're only bidding this much. So it's iffy. So if you can pre-sale, it's a good thing to do it. The rights that are being sold in the foreign market are subject to certain tiers, because not every territory, every country has the same value. There are 2 tiers, tier 1 and tier 2. And the banks look at them in 2 chunks, and they say the tier 1 territories are the strong countries, they are economically strong, they are always paying on time, we know the distributors, and we take a pre-sale contract from them and we finance it between 80 and 100% of what the number is that's on the contract. So let's say you do a deal with Konstantin in Germany for $1 million. Comerica says, great, we'll take the contract, we'll give you $1 million loan. Now, there are certain other countries that have been seen a little iffy. They could be economically challenged, like Greece for a while was very economically challenged, and the bank would either not cash flow a Greek contract at all, or cash flow it only up to a certain number, like 50%. That would be a tier 2 territory. It could also be that a strong country, maybe Russia is very strong in the buying community, but spotty when it comes to paying on time. So the bank says. So the bank will say to you, well, Russia is a strong country and they're paying okay, but the distributor you chose is hit and miss, and they sometimes pay, they sometimes don't, and then they pay late, because they know, the banks know all the distributors and their paying habits. So it could be that the bank says to you, this contract we're only giving you 50% for. Whatever the bank will do and how much money they will give you for a contract is something that you will know in advance, because they will give you a term sheet. Just remember that they will look at these countries in 2 tiers, and the value is driven by the payment pattern of the country. You will not be subject to foreign box office risk when you do a pre-sale or a sale, because what happens is you sell the movie, again, let's say you sell your movie to Germany, Konstantin Film, large German distributor, they take the movie and they buy the theatrical rights and the television rights and the online rights and the DVD rights, and they exploit all these rights. They pay you $1 million for all these rights, and they keep those rights for, let's say, 5 or 7 years. So during that time, they can exploit all these rights. So they will take the movie into the theaters. They will pay the release campaign. They will pay everything that is to be paid that's connected to the release of the movie. Now the movie makes box office. Okay, so now Konstantin pays itself back. It pays back its release cost, its distribution fee. It pays back itself the money that it paid to you as a license fee, and it pays back all the costs. Okay. There might be a situation where Konstantin ends up with a loss, where the money that they made with your movie, in the end of the day, is a loss for them, because all these expenses and the box office, they're all crap, nothing worked. For you, it's like, oh, well, I already have my $1 million, not my problem. But it could also be that Konstantin actually makes money. So at the end of the day, there is money left over after all these expenses are paid. In that case, you would be participating in what is called an overage. So Konstantin will give you maybe 50% after all the expenses are paid for, and send you extra money in addition to the minimum guarantee that they paid you. So what that means is you benefit from the revenues for the box office that were reached in these various countries, but you're not subject to any losses. That's something to be important about, because what you receive, the license fee, is called a minimum guarantee. It's the minimum amount you get no matter what the performance in the territory is looking like. When you put a movie together, sometimes it takes a little time. In that time, things can change. So let's say you started a conversation with the sales agent, you had Nicole Kidman in your art house movie for $5 million. Nicole Kidman then does some stupid thing and her value crashes within the time you're putting the movie together, which might be a year. It's not uncommon. Now you're dealing with a problem because the value that Nicole Kidman had at the beginning when you put the movie together is now no longer applicable. The option you have is you can, of course, replace Nicole Kidman if the pay or play offer allows it, which we'll talk about what that entails, or you reduce your budget. These are the only two options, but just be aware that in some cases, sales estimates can change subject to the value elements that you have and their value in the marketplace at the time you're actually making the movie. So it's a good idea to try to get it done in a certain period of time. Now, when you do a deal with a distributor or a sales agent, there are a few things you have to be aware of in order to avoid some pitfalls. And every producer, including me, at some point made mistakes in doing stupid deals with distributors. I mean, distributors are basically salespeople. I always say they're like car salespeople. They have to make the most they can. The way they make money is their distribution fee and their expenses. Your job is to negotiate with the sales agent and a distributor the lowest possible distribution fee and the lowest possible expenses. And if you can cap the expenses, as we talked about earlier, that's a good thing. The second thing you want to know is when you do a deal with the sales agent and they give you these sales estimates, hold them to it. Tell them, okay, these are your numbers. How will you get to those numbers? How long will it take for you to reach them? Put them on a time schedule. Basically, put them on a performance clause where they tell you it's going to take me about 3 years to get this. And in the 3 years, I'll get a third in year 1, another third in year 2, and the balance by the end of year 3. Have them tell you exactly when they get what money. Because what can happen is if you do a deal with a sales agent and you don't have a performance clause, they take your movie and maybe they sit on it. Maybe they have too many other movies that they're selling and they can't pay attention to this. It happens all the time. Or they overestimated and weren't quite honest with you about their estimates. Happens all the time. And they're like, yeah, you only make half of what we said we would do. And now you're in deep trouble because you told your investors this is how much money we're going to make. Your investor would want you to do all you can to protect them. And all you can to protect them is your duty to do that. That's why your conversation with a sales agent should be, tell me when you can make what money from these numbers that you told me you will be making. And if they can't reach those numbers, you have the right to take the movie away from them. So if they don't make a third in the first year, the movie goes back to you after the first year. At least that way, you can find another sales agent who hopefully will do better. Versus if you don't have a performance clause in there, you can do nothing. You basically wait out the 5 or 7 years that the movie is with the sales agent and there's nothing you can do. Not a good place to be. Sales agents sometimes ask for distribution rights. And there is a distinction between the sales agent working on your behalf as a sales agent, selling rights that you as the producer own and control, to being the distributor, in which case they own the rights. With distribution deals, you give away rights, and you should only give away distribution rights if they pay for it. If the sales agent pays you in advance, let's say, that's fine. Then you can give them the distribution rights. If the sales agent would be someone that does what an actual distributor do, release the movie in the theater, put it out on TV, put it out on DVD, put it out to the network, which most sales agents do not. What's the point in them being distributors if they don't actually do the work of a distributor? No point. You don't want to give them the distribution rights. Give them the right to sell unless they pay you in advance. And then you can have a conversation about distribution rights. Prepaid. The sales agent will ask you to prepay sometimes certain things. And when they ask you to do that, that number should be very little. And that number should be something that will go into your budget. And what that number is for is them taking your movie to, let's say, the American film market and making a poster, maybe making a trailer, wooing and booing the buyers. Right now, none of that's applicable because everything's online, so they shouldn't really be asking for anything. Maybe they ask you, do a little trailer, maybe you do the trailer, maybe they ask you for a poster. Whatever it is, it should be very little. But it is basically money they use to market your movie in the marketplace. It's not P&A, it's not the money used to do a theatrical campaign. So if it is money that you give them, it's a very small amount in the budget, and it really relates to the budget. So I would say 1% of the budget, potentially. It's a conversation to be had with the agent, of course, but don't make it an expensive thing. And if they ask for money up front to take it to the markets, it's something you can pay, but it should, again, very little. I think the most I've ever paid for a sales agent to take a movie to the theater, to Cannes Film Festival, I think it was for Cannes Film Festival, Berlinale, and another market. And I think it was a movie for $20 million with Jason Statham. I think I paid like $10,000 for all 3 markets. Okay, it's a $20 million movie, so $10,000 seems okay. But that should be the relation, just to give you an idea of what that should be. Performance cost we talked about. There's another thing that's important for you to insist on when you do a deal with a sales agent. You must have a collection agent component in there. What that means is that there is a third party collecting the money that the distributors are paying. So when the German buyer, Konstantin, buys the German rights and does the deal with the sales agent, the money does not go to the sales agent. The money goes to the collection agent. It should never go to the sales agent, because what happens if the sales agent goes bankrupt? The money is gone. The sales agent usually take a long time to give you accounting. I mean, in the Dog Whisperer scenario, for example, it took them 3 months to put an accounting together, and then it took them another 3 months to pay out. 6 months waiting for your money that they already have sitting in their account, not a good thing. Sales agents are also not accountants. It's not an ideal situation. So make sure that the sales agent agrees to have all the distributors pay into a neutral collection account managed by a collection agent. There's only 2 collection agents in this industry. One is called Freeway Entertainment, and the other one is called Vintage House. You'll find the information in the module. Just know that that's important. And the other reason why that's important is you as the producer have a responsibility towards the investor. And your liability decreases significantly if you never touch the money that comes in. You can literally say to your investor, all the revenues go to the collection agent. The collection agent pays the distribution fees, pays the expenses, pays the bank back, pays you back, investor, pays your premium back, pays your profit participation, pays me, pays anyone who's related to this project. I don't touch the money. I don't pay anyone. Because you don't do this, the liability decreases substantially. And that's what you want. You do not want to be responsible for any money. You do not want to be responsible for any kind of calculation and auditing. Audits get very expensive. Investors have the right to ask for audits. And if they ask for an audit, you say, yeah, you can audit. Go to the collection agent, talk to them, and they'll give you all the information. That's the best way for you to be. You are paying for the service. It's 1% of the revenues you're receiving. It's the best 1% you'll ever pay. Trust me on this. You can offer your investor total transparency because they will see in the collection report that the collection agent issues every time money comes in. They see exactly how much money comes in. They see exactly where the money is going, and they see exactly when they're going to be in line and getting their money back. They love this. This is essential for transparency, so keep that in mind. Not every sales agent will agree to this, and the sales agent that does not agree to a collection agent is the sales agent you do not do a deal with. Just remember this. Now, when we talk about an independent finance model based on the things we just have discussed, what would that look like in a finance plan? How do I get to 100% of my budget? If I have a $10 million budget, how do I get there? We talked about that you want to have, obviously, ideally, the estimates, meaning your projected revenues from the international market, should be anywhere around 70 to 75% of your budget in the ideal world. Of that, you want to ideally sell about a third. So 30% would be your pre-sales, right? The bank will then hopefully give you a 20% loan on the rights you haven't sold yet. And then you should try to find a tax region where you can shoot, or an incentivized production region where you can shoot, where you can net about 20% of your budget, which becomes a non-recoupable finance source. So if you shoot in Georgia, New Mexico, I mean, you know the game. There are certain areas in the US and also outside of the US that offer incentives of up to 50% of the eligible expenses that you're spending there. Now, what is eligible and what is not eligible changes wherever you are. In Canada, it's this. In Germany, it's that. In the US, it's this. It's different. There's a great website on entertainment partners. I call it the, what is it? It's a virtual incentive map. It's also on the module, and entertainment partners, just write that down. They show you exactly in a world globe what incentive is right now applicable in what region and what the eligible expenses are. Because you only get money, obviously, on what is eligible. Now, the trick here is to figure out the following. Let's say you go to New Mexico and you get to New Mexico, and New Mexico has certain eligible expenses that it accepts. You go through the budget and the estimate comes back to you in saying that you get 25% of your budget subsidized by New Mexico. Okay, that's a number and it's a piece of paper. Now, what do you do with that? How do you get the cash to finance your movie? Well, right now you don't. You don't want to wait a year, make your movie, and then get the money later and fight with New Mexico about what's right and wrong. No, that's not a good scenario either. I'll explain to you why in a minute. The point here is you take the estimate from New Mexico, give it to a tax incentive lender, which by the way could be your bank too. Some banks do this. And they will cash flow this tax credit for you in advance of you making the movie. So now you got another 20%, and that's money you don't have to pay back, because that tax incentive lender goes to New Mexico at the end when everything is done and you're done with your movie and gets paid back from the New Mexico government and the incentive authorities. You don't have to deal with anything. Obviously, you pay for the service. So a small percentage goes to the tax incentive lender. That could be anywhere from 5 to 20%, depending on what jurisdiction it is. That gives you the incentive, and depending on what lender it is. But the idea here for you is you don't deal with the risk of changing legislations, which happens all the time. You know, New Mexico pays this, you know, for DPs, and the next day they don't pay you the DP anymore. The eligible cost changes, or they run out of money all of a sudden by the time you get to produce. I mean, there's 1,000 things that can happen. You don't want to deal with any of it. I did a movie in Iowa. I got 50% out of Iowa. By the time I was done with the movie, the Iowa program was already canned. Thank God I had a tax incentive lender who gave me the $5 million advance. Well, my tax incentive lender ended up suing Iowa, $5 million. Not my problem. Thank God. So I personally have witnessed legislation changes within the time period of which I was producing. I can tell you it's painful. So use that money, have a tax incentive lender, then you don't have to figure out when do I do this on my tax return? What did I actually spend? Where are my receipts? All that headache, who needs it? You need to produce a movie that has top quality. That's your focus. You don't need to be dealing with all this other nonsense. Use a tax incentive lender, get another 20% in your budget. So now we have a lot of money already. The balance, when we have 30% pre-sales, 20% from the bank, another 20% from the incentive, you end up with about 30%-ish from an equity investor. And that's a good number from an equity investor. Of course, you can add things like in-kind deals, mezzanine financing, product integration, sales agent MG. Now, here's what that is. Obviously, all these finance sources you will learn about as you go through the course. So if I throw them at you right now, don't get confused. But the main point is you can do deferment deals with, let's say, a post-production house. Post-production house says, the post-production budget that we see that you have is $500,000. We're willing to defer 250 of it. So now you're only paying 250,000 during your funding phase. And you pay the other 250,000 from recoupment. It's basically a mini investment. Or a music investor comes to you and says, I want to buy all the music rights for your movie, and I will pay the music budget that's $50,000. So now you save $50,000. Yes, you gave the music rights away, but do you really make that much money from music rights? Really not. So that's another $50,000 you don't have to pay, and you got a little investment there. So those little things you can deal with. But if we go by just financing sources that we just talked about, pre-sales, bank loan, incentive, you end up with about 30% from an equity investor. And with the movies that I have done and the TV projects that I have done, 35% was my number, where if I had more equity invested, it started to get iffy. I had one movie I was in with like 40, and I'm still recouping on that one. So that tells you there is a certain number where the risk gets too iffy. Now, any investor who says, if you're making a movie for 10 million and I'm in for 3 million, they also know that their risk is much lower and that there is actually a chance for them to make money. So the possibility for you to find someone to do that deal is much higher than finding someone to do 100% equity. Now, what the equity investor could do, he could take over the bank position. The bank gives you 20% as a loan, remember? If the equity investor takes over that position and now the equity investor becomes a 50% investor, that's okay, and here's why. The equity investor knows that when you have a bank loan, the bank will recoup before the equity recoups. So the bank makes money back first, 20% gets paid back first, pre-sales come in anyway. The bank loan is paid first, and when the bank loan is paid off, the next person to recoup and get their money back would be the equity investor. So if the equity investor waits until the bank has paid the 20%, or if the equity investor says, I'm taking over the bank position, the risk profile hasn't changed because it recoups at the same position. And he makes a little more money because now he can charge you more premium. He gives you 50% of the budget versus 30%. The premium the equity investor charges is usually about 20% on the money. So you give them back the 30%, and then you give them an additional 20% of the 30% later. Everything happens in recoupment. So that's something for you to think about. We talked about the sales agent minimum guarantee. If the sales agent gives you an advance because they really like your movie and they really want to have it and they really want to sell it, that advance is basically replacing your bank loan. You cannot have a bank loan and a minimum guarantee from a sales agent. And the reason is they're both recouped from the same pot at the same time. The bank will not allow you to have anyone recoup with them, next to them, from the same collateral, from the same rights that they do. The bank will always recoup in first position, and no one recoups with them, and no one recoups from the same collateral pool, so from these unsold rights. Now, when the sales agent gives you an advance, obviously they're paying themselves back from the rights they're making. So they would be recouping from the same pot of rights, and the bank will not agree to that. So you would have to make a decision if you take the minimum guarantee the sales agent gives you, or if you take the 20% bank loan. You still get the pre-sale loan, by the way, from the bank. You can still take that one. You just cannot take the gap portion. Gap is the 20% loan portion against unsold rights. So that's a little thing you need to know when you take a sales agent MG. I'm going to run you through a little study here, which I will also send you the Excel sheet for when we're done. I'm going to just do an example for a movie that is $8 million. We have a sales agent that charges 15% as a sales fee and 1% for expenses. We have a collection agent who charges us 1% from all the revenues because he handles all the revenues that come in and all the payments that need to be made. We have a tax incentive for 20% of the budget, and we get a loan for that. And we have the pre-sale cash load, which are, I think, 35%, if I'm not mistaken. And the equity finances the rest. So the finance plan is basically what I just mentioned to you and kind of comes together to look like this. So here's our $8 million budget. Our sales estimates showing 75% of that, which is $6 million. We're not thinking about any US rights. We're selling the US later for $3 million, but we're not using it to finance our movie. So it's showing 0 here. We are establishing 35% of pre-sales, which we're putting in. And we are looking at 3.2 million that's still available. And how we get there is 8 million budget, 75% is our entire foreign rights revenues number. Of that, we have 2.8 million pre-sold. So we have left 3.2 million in unsold rights we still have to sell. That's kind of what our structure looks right now that we're going with, that we're starting with. So when we go to the bank gives us a pre-sale loan. Right now, we're not talking about interest. We're not talking about discounts. We're not doing all that. We're getting into that later. So we're keeping it very simple. So the bank gives us our $2.8 million pre-sales here. The bank will also give us 50% of the unsold rights. Remember, we had $3.2 million that we could still sell. And 50% of that is 1.6 million. And that's our gap loan from the bank. So altogether, the bank gives us 4.4 million as a bank loan. That's the pre-sale loan and the gap loan for the rights we haven't sold yet. So when we look at that, we get our 1.6 million, 20% of the budget of the incentive. We're not putting a fee in here. We'll get to that later. So we have altogether $6 million with the incentive and the bank loan. The budget is $8 million, so we need another $2 million from the equity investor, and that's here. And the equity investor is basically giving us 25% of our budget in this example. So when we're looking at what does it look like when we have to pay everyone back, we're now selling the US because the movie's finished. We're saying, yay, the movie's finished. We're making $3 million with this $8 million movie. So we're putting in $3 million coming in from the US. We're putting in the $6 million that we have from international rights. So we're getting just that. And then we get to $9 million. So now who do we have to pay? The collection agency fee, 1% is paid first. The sales agent is paid afterwards. Now, here's something you need to know. Many banks will require that the sales agent fee is paid after the bank has recouped its bank loan. Not everyone does it, which is why I'm showing you this, but be aware that in the recoupment scheduling, this position can change. So it could very well be that the bank would be in the second position here and get paid first, and the sales agent moves down in the third position to get paid after the bank loan. So in our case, we pay the sales agent the 16%, we pay the bank loan. 16% is from what they have sold. What they have sold is $6 million in rights, right? So we get them 16% of 6 million, it might be all the rights here. The bank loan we're paying back, the equity is $2 million, and then the equity premium is $400,000. So we're paying everyone back, and the expenses get to $8,330,000, and our net revenue is now $670. So after we pay all the expenses from all the revenues, we end up with $670,000. So here's what the equity investor gets. In many cases, the equity investor gets 50% of the percentage in relation to the budget that they gave you. If the equity investor finances 50% of the budget, his profit participation here would be 25%. If the equity investor finances your whole movie 100%, he would get 50% profit participation. The equity investor in our case gave us 25% of the budget and therefore gets 12.5% in profit, and the rest goes to you. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have one question. You kind of touched on it, but making sure I heard right.
Yes.
When you strike some of these deals, the sales agent, the foreign, and especially the incentive, are they non-recourse, or is that something that you have to negotiate? And is it something they may push for, like a guarantee of getting it?
Let me talk to you about recourse. I think that's a very good question. Let's start with the bank. The bank gives you a loan. The recourse for the bank is your movie LLC, not you personally, ever. Nowhere in your agreements will you ever give a personal guarantee to anyone, ever. The only person, the only entity that signs is the LLC that you will put together for your little movie. Your movie LLC enters in all the agreements, the agency agreement, the lending agreement, the tax incentive agreement, every agreement, the crew agreement, the writer's agreement, the actor's agreement, every agreement you will ever touch in the world of making this movie will be done through your LLC. When you do the first option deal, let's say you, Arnold, do a deal with a writer, right? And that deal might be with you, Arnold, and the writer. You will later transfer that deal into the LLC so that everything sits with the LLC. It's very important. Now, the recourse, again, for the bank loan is the movie and the rights, which is why it's so important for them to believe in the sales agent. They believe in the sales agent more than they believe in you. They could care less what Arnold does. They want to know what your sales agent is doing, right? So the bankability of the sales agent is important. They will also look if the movie was able to make pre-sales, because they require 3 pre-sales as minimum to give you a loan. The bank does. The bank will make sure that the movie has value. And it's good for you that the bank makes sure that the movie has value. If the bank gives you a loan, you know you're on a good path, because banks very rarely lose money with these. They've been doing this structure for 80 years. This structure has never changed. The bank will give you a bank loan, they give you a gap loan, they bank these numbers, never changes. So there are certain things that while the industry changes, there are other things that will never change, and it's good for you to know what that is because they will always be there for you. So that's the recourse. Now, when it comes to the tax credit lender, the incentive lender, you will do a deal with them where you tell them, here is the estimate of what the New Mexico government is willing to pay. This is the New Mexico government paying, not you, Arnold, New Mexico over there, okay? So the deal will be, I will give you a fee of 15%, dear tax incentive lender, of this estimate for you to take over all the risks and take care of the payment with New Mexico. Don't come to me for money because I'm not giving you any, right? So New Mexico is paying, and this becomes a non-recourse loan for you because you don't have to pay this back. Now, the equity investor is someone you also don't give a personal guarantee to, but they will own a portion of your LLC. So the little movie LLC that you have, you will give them a portion of interest membership shares, right? The membership interest for the LLC will be in relation to what the investor is giving you. So in our case, it would be about 12.5% because that's the profit participation they get, right? If they're being normal, now equity investors do all kinds of things. So I have heard them asking for more in membership interest, and I've heard them asking for more in profits. But if you go by industry standards, the little LLC that you have founded right now would allocate 12.5% membership interest to the investor. That's the LLC, not you personally. Your risk, however, is that you do all in your power to protect this investor, which is why you cannot unknow the things I just told you. You have to do your due diligence. You have to do everything to protect the investor and to make their risk small. So you need to do a good project, and you need to make sure it's pre-sellable. And you need to make sure you have a collection agent. So for the equity investor, the collateral is still the movie and its revenues. So there isn't anyone in that value chain that would require a personal collateral or personal guarantee. So don't mortgage your house, don't sell your car, don't do any of that nonsense, okay? Stick with the LLC because you created a little business. When you create a little business, it's just like a startup business. You create this business and you tell people, you want to be a part of this? Okay, be a part of the business. But not coming home to me, having dinner with me, wanting to eat my food from my plate. Not happening. So just keep these things separate. You personally as a business owner, and then the LLC that you create that is your business. Does that make sense? Answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? So the principle is clear, how we put these finance plans together, right? So we're going, yeah, go ahead, Arnold.
A lot of the equity crowdfunding in movie spaces right now have been offering that the investor gets paid back plus a 15 or 20%.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on that as a practice?
Well, that's what you're paying too. Look, in my schedule here, you pay them 20%. So basically, the equity, let's say the equity gives you $1 million for a movie that's $3 million, right? So what you pay back first is the $1 million, but you pay back next is $200,000, 20% premium. What you pay back next is the profit, right? So what these crowdfunders do is they do the same thing. They ask for repayment plus premium. It used to be that crowdfunding like Kickstarter, GoFundMe, they wouldn't have to be repaid. It would basically be get a t-shirt, get a hat, get a visit to set, you know, have a coffee with, you know, Nicole Kidman, visit me on the yacht. I mean, the strangest things I have done, trust me, with these investors. Let me go on the red carpet in Cannes. Put my mistress in my movie. I'm not kidding. This actually happened to me. So they have all these things. And some might be more about repayment and others might be, I just want to have fun. Now, the idea for you is obviously, it is all spelled out in the deal with the equity investor, and whatever the equity investor wants needs to be in there as long as it's feasible. What is feasible is what you're learning in this class. So don't let them grab on to your house, your car, your grandmother, and your unborn child. Not happening. But know what the standards are, but also know that there is wiggle room. Now, GoFundMe, Kickstarter, some of these crowdsourcing pages, as you know, you send them something, you do something, and they'll find you don't have to pay that back. But a regular equity investor, you would likely have to pay them back. Make sense? Okay. Any other question? Great. So what I will do is I will send you the little Excel sheet for this example that I have run you through. So you have kind of like a backbone, and I'll send you the PDF for this PowerPoint. And so, you know, in the module, you'll find some Excels, right? You can use them, but you don't have to use them. You can do your own. You can handwrite it down. I don't care. Word documents, whatever the document is that you want to put on, however the math you use to go through, you don't have to use my Excel sheets. In fact, some of Excel sheets that I'm sending you, they might have stuff in them that might not be applicable. So just be very careful in using my Excel sheets, because the further we get in the course, the bigger they are, and not every case study has everything applicable. So just make sure that you understand when you use them, what is actually applicable for this study that I'm working on. And if anything is not opening, please feel free to let me know. We will be expanding a lot on how these finance structures work, interest rates, deals, terms, who do we pay, when are we paying them? So don't get, you know, it will all be explained to you. What all I wanted to do today is give you a basic structure from where it all begins, and then we will branch out from there. Does that make sense? Cool. This was a lot of fun. If you don't have questions, then I wish you a nice weekend.
Can I throw one more question?
Yeah, please, Arnold. I'm so glad. Please.
So yeah, I figure this will be covered later, but since it goes back to something you touched on.
Yeah.
Obviously, names, A-list, whatever you want to call it, actors are critical to this part.
Correct.
But can you speak to if one name actor is important, or you need 3, and does it need to be screen time?
Very good question. Very good question. It will be worked on later, but I do want to say this. If you get one good actor in a lead role, don't waste your time in getting more. That is all you need. You need one. Everyone else could be no-name actors. They just have to be good. Even the director, I mean, I wouldn't really do my first project with the first-time director. Sorry, Mr. Toronto over there. First-time director is hard when you do your first project, unless you have Nicole Kidman in it, and then it's fine. So, you know, there are a few things that will work, but if it's a first-time director and no cast, very difficult to find. It's very difficult to sell. But one actor is all you need. So if you have a story, and I've seen this so many times where actors, let's say, for example, an actor is a comedy actor, and they really want to play a drama because they want to show their chops. They want to show they have range. And actors are all about, I'm really good at what I do. So they look at these projects and say, wow, I get to climb a tree. I get to play this dramatic person with all this range. I get to do these amazing things that I've never done. And they do it for $5 because they want to play that part so badly. So this happens. This is not out of the ordinary that this happens, but this means the script has to be really good. The range for the actor has to be described very interesting. And it needs to, and you need to think about, okay, who can I aim this to that has never done this? You know, that's really where you get creative. You know, for some people it works, and for some people it doesn't. I mean, I'm still cringing when I see Will Ferrell in a drama, I'm sorry to say. But there are certain people where it works. I mean, you know, George Clooney, we get to actors where we say, yeah, they work in both. They work in drama, they work in thriller, they work in comedy. You know, there are actors that have variety. But let's look at people that, you know, let's say you do a comedy and you have a serious actor like Ian McKellen in it. I mean, I don't know if that works or not, but, you know, it'll put him together with Mindy Kaling or someone and becomes interesting. I mean, something. Just be creative about who you want to play the lead that you can actually realistically get to, because they haven't done this before, because they would be really enticed by this. And that's something you can talk to casting directors about, because they know all the secrets about the actors, and they know who's looking for what. And actors are very sensitive, little beautiful children, and they just want to be seen, and they want to show off good. And it's really not too difficult to, you know, get them what they need, because they are actors. That's what they want to do. They want to show what they're made of. Does that make sense? So that would be how I would cast a lower budgeted movie with an A-level actor. If you can't pay them.
On that
Go
note,
ahead.
sorry, on that note, so you were saying if you have an A-list, I'm actually an actor myself.
Hey, Griffin, then you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're exactly right. I actually did a movie with Vince Vaughn a while ago where he tried to play drama and it totally tanked. So it is risky when you get those actors to try that something new. Sometimes it doesn't work. However, I just wanted to touch real quick. You had said for first-time directors, what I would hope to be soon, it does really help when you're raising money. You said if you do have that A-list star, and somebody would be more likely to trust you as a first-time director if you have that star test. Okay.
Yes, but you would also then combine forces with a somewhat established producer. If you yourself, Griffin, listen, you've seen the set, you know what it looks like, you know the people, you're an actor, you want to now direct something, which by the way is a great way to take charge of your career, and I applaud you for that. Because sitting by the phone waiting for someone to call you for a part, who needs that? So it's great to do your own material, right? And then get it made. Now you have worked with Vince Vaughn, you have worked with people to tell them, here, I have this great script, do you want to be in it? I have this great part for you, good start. But I would try to then combine forces with a producer who takes all the headaches away from you. Because you want to spend time on your project with your actors, with yourself, if you're in it, you know, making this the best it can be. And you will be so distracted when you're also producing. You can be a producer on it as a credit, but the actual work should ideally be done by someone else. I actually mentioned that earlier. For anyone who starts out as a first-time director who has another job on this, like in your case, I'm guessing you also want to be in your movie, try to, or maybe not, I don't know, but try to.
I'm indifferent.
Try to offset the burdens of the other very big job of producing at that point, because it is two different things. Directing is very different. I would never direct, because that detail that is needed to direct, my husband directs. I applaud him every day. I don't know how the guy does it. Seriously,
I applaud all the producers. I'm desperately trying to learn the producer side, because that part is the scarier side to me. I'll work with an actor,
it's
I'll work with the vision, but
Griffin, it's a logical, producing is logic. I love logic because it's A, B, C, D, E. It's all put together in a little tiny box, and it's all on a spreadsheet, and I love spreadsheets. So, as you'll find out soon. But they're creative. There is a flow that needs to be done. You need to be inspired. It's a whole different process. It has nothing to do with logic. Okay, some has to do because you want to have the lighting set up. You want to know what your color scheme is. You want to set a mood. You want all that. There's some logic, but a lot of it is flow. A lot of it is a different brain part. So if that's not there, shit out of luck. So not for me, just saying. Kudos to you. All right, I think Juan had a question, right?
Yeah. Actually, I also wanted to say that I mean, Jim is really amazing. Like, he also produced too, so it's it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, you in Jim's class?
Yeah. I was the illustrator for the.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
And
yeah, thank you. And I had the question about the. So you talked about a lot of the sellers on Germany, for example, the distribution, and how European countries buy the rights. But do you think it's also profitable to think about Chile, like South American countries that have a lot of history of film, like Argentina?
Of course.
But they have a more volatile, economy. So I don't know.
No, but actually, believe it or not, the Latin American market is pretty strong. The banks see that as a tier 1 territory, because they have a very strong buying market. They have a very reliable taste bud, as the people say. They know exactly what they want. They know exactly how it works, because there's a history of things that work. And they're very emotionally driven, as in, we want movies. They love that stuff. So, and they're very reliable payers. I've never worked with anyone in Argentina, Chile, or Brazil who didn't pay, honestly. Great. I think you have very good bones there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Barbara, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering, if a film goes on to win big awards, does that have any effect on financials? Would there be clauses in contracts?
Well, first of all, it depends on who you're talking to, who's your contractual partner. If your studio is a contractual partner, if it's a Netflix or a streamer, or if it's a TV partner, you can negotiate bonuses subject to you getting awards. That's number one. When it comes to investors, there is really no change because they just want to make their money back, and they make more money when the movie has an award. Does it drive the revenues? I think it drives it somewhat. I think you can make more money with, depending on what kind of award it is. If it's an Academy Award, or a high level like a Sundance or like a Tribeca or something high level of a festival, I think that drive Cannes Festival, Berlinale, those kind of movie festivals, they drive the value for sure, and they up the sales. So once the movie hits these awards, the revenues increase. So that's definitely applicable. For you as a producer, I would just make sure in your contract with whoever you do the movie with, that you get bonuses if that is the case. Does that answer your question? Yeah, one.
Oh yeah, are any festivals work, or I mean, those investors are like, if it's not Cannes. Oh,
Not
okay.
any.
Okay.
I call
Okay.
I call it the big five. So
Okay,
to
yeah.
me, the big festivals that add value to your movie is the Cannes Film Festival, Berlinale, Sundance,
Toronto.
Toronto. Thank you. There's one more. Maybe Vienna. Am I missing big one? I feel like
South by Southwest.
No, not South by Southwest. None of those. So
Venice?
those are the. Which one? Venice, yes, Vienna. Venice is what I was saying. That's a fifth.
Oh, sorry.
Which one? Another one, you guys? No, those are the fifth. Those are the five. Those are the ones that add value. All the other ones.
What was the second one you said?
Yeah, what was
Berlinale, the German film festival, which is in February or whenever it is now. They're moving everything. So it's really Cannes, Berlin, Toronto, Vienna, and Sundance, those. And they have different levels, of course. Sundance is more for smaller movies. Cannes and Berlinale are more for bigger movies. So it really depends on what it is. Now the French are, I should say the French are the French. I mean, the Palme d'Or, I mean, sometimes when it goes to a French movie, I just go, quoi? How's that happening? I half the time don't understand what the movie is about. So there is that. But even to be in the selection, I think already means something in Cannes. So the Palme d'Or itself really depends on what movie it is. When it's being, the Palme d'Or is the prize you get at the Cannes Film Festival. But being in the selection is already meaningful for the Cannes Film Festival. So that already means something also for you, Barbara. That's already something to put on your head, like a little feather. I've never had any of those. My movies are way too commercial, unfortunately. Okay, go ahead.
I had a question about pre-sale. With the current market, like after COVID, like theaters, even if they're open in some countries, like not as many people are going anymore. Is that changing the number you can get with pre-sale? Because I feel like the foreign market is a lot based on box office still.
It is. Here's the thing, what's happening over there. Like in the US, they have all kinds of streaming services that are coming into the market. They have local streaming services that we don't even have here, right? They need content. So while the theatrical market is not as active, the streaming market is very active. And more people watch TV because everyone's at home. What else are they going to do? So they need content. So there is a high demand of content. Now the distribution revenue chain theaters, if that's not applicable, they sometimes still buy it just because they want all rights. But if they don't buy it, the license fee goes down by about 20%, because that's what the value usually is of theatrical. It's between 20 to like 35% of the license price is the theatrical just by itself. So that would go down. The pricing in general, as I mentioned earlier, has gone down because everyone is struggling. All these economies are struggling with the disruption caused first by Netflix and then by everything else that's going on. But because there is a loss of product right now, because we all couldn't produce, that no one produced anything, A, we couldn't, and B, how do we produce without understanding what the financial markets are right now? It's all up in the air. So there is a real loss of content. There isn't enough content there. So my prediction is that there's going to be a run on content very soon, and that will hopefully increase the pricing a little bit. But even if you get content on for enough money to make and then continue the relationship with a streamer or a network. That alone is worth a lot, because often it's about opening a door with a partner that you make content for and then continue that relationship, then making, you know, $3 million with your first project, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
Did I answer all of yours? Okay, now go off in the weekend then. Stay healthy, stay safe. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Do the
And
same.
I see
Thank you,
you.
Jeanette.
If I don't
Thank
see you in between in office hours, you can, you know, or so I see you in 2 weeks. All right. Mwah!
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Thank
Have a
you.
nice
Bye.
weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, stop.